Hookles Wheel Custom Airbrushing. Today's video, I'm going to break down all my steps on how to create my cups. So I start off with a brand new cup most of the time. I always get the stainless steel versions. So I do sandblast these cups to prep the surface. So when I do paint my base coats and everything else, that paint has something to adhere to. So I found the best way for me is to sandblast the surface of the area. So the first thing I do when I grab my cup out, I take everything off, and then I'll take a heat-resistant tape, which is for like powder coating and stuff, and I'll take that and I'll tape off the interior from the top down, not all the way down, just a couple layers, usually to the bevel. So what that tape does is protects the inside of the cup from overspray, and in my case, sandblasting media from damage to the inside. Most of the time when I'm sandblasting, I'm sandblasting away from the top, and when I'm painting, I have my cup sitting on a stand I made, so it's always pointing down. So I don't get a whole lot in there, but it can. So that's why I always protect the inside first. Prep work is the most important part of the whole thing. If you don't prep your cups right, that paint's not going to stick on there. So be sure you follow these steps close, and if you do, you won't have your paint peeling off when you're taking your stencil work off. So if you follow these steps, you're not going to have anything peeling off, and your cup should be perfect. When I do sandblast, I'm sandblasting the whole surface, and I pay attention to the areas that's going to get the most wear and tear, which is usually the top and this bottom ring right here at the bottom. So I'll take a little bit extra time and really get those areas sandblasted good all the way around. On these stainless steel cups, you really can't see it, but there is like a clear coating on that, so that's another reason I like to sandblast. It'll take all that off all the way into the metal. If you don't have a sandblasting cabinet, you can use the maroon and gray Scotch-Brite pads. If I was going to use a Scotch-Brite pad way, I'd start off with the gray pads and just rough up that surface real good, and then you'll break it down to the maroon pads. So you just kind of want to smooth out your surfaces. And if you can't get Scotch-Brite pads, or you don't like using Scotch-Brite pads, you can also use sandpaper. I would start off with like a 600 grit sandpaper and rough up the edges, and then come back with an 800 grit, and then clean your surface off. So after I sandblast it, and you'll see in later on in the video, but after I sandblast and get my cup cleaned off, there is a residue on there, so like from the metal and everything. So I'll use acetone and squirt this down and wipe it off until there's no more residue. So it might take 2 or 3 times, of wiping it off before you get all that residue off. So that's very important too. So after you clean it, when there's no more residue coming off, then you can move on to your base coat. But one more thing before we jump in, always wear gloves. Yeah, I've been messing with this cup because I have my oils on my fingers on there, but I'm fixing to sandblast it anyway. So when you do start painting, make sure you're wearing gloves, like latex gloves or whatever, to make sure you don't get the oils off your fingers on the surface of the cup, because that might cause the paint to bubble or peel in those areas. So from here, I'm going to go out, start sandblasting, and break down each step from there. All right, let's get to it. So I got most of the cup sandblasted. I'm going to hit this last little area. So we get that top area pretty good. Already sandblasted most of it. So now we're going to stop and pull this out. I'm going to get it cleaned off and we'll move off to the next step. All right, now that I got everything sandblasted, I'm going to pull off all the residue off this cup. So I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times with acetone. We'll spray it down all the way around. And we'll start wiping it off. It's a very important step. If you look at this, you'll see all the gray residue off there. If you didn't clean this off, it'll make your paint come off. So I'm going to spray it again and keep doing this until it's clean. I'm doing this outside because normally I'm doing it inside, but I want it to be nice and lit so you guys can see what I'm doing. All right, I've already cleaned this off a couple times, so I'm going to go ahead and spray my base coat. I'm going to get all this blown out. Really pay attention to that seam. Make sure everything's out of that little seam. So we'll keep on blowing this off. I think everything looks good from here. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready and spray the first base coat. I've got my Wicked Detail white on here. This is what I use for my base coat. I'm going to spray even coats all the way around. Just about done. Get the bottom real good. All right. After this coat, I'm going to let this dry. Then I'm going to take it back out, rough it up a little bit, and lay on the next coat. All right, so this coat's dry. Now I'm going to take my maroon Scotch-Brite pad and rough this cup up all the way around. The reason why I'm doing this is so when I lay the second layer of the base coat, it gives that second layer something to adhere to. So I'm going to dry it off a little bit, get all the residue off. Sometimes I'll blow this off. Most of the time I just wipe it off like this. And then we'll spray our next coat. What this is doing is covering up all the little scratches we just put into it and any other little imperfections in that first base coat. So everything's cleaned up after the second base coat. All right, so after this, I'm going to throw it back in a mobile oven, let this coat dry, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, that second base coat is dry. So again, I'm going to hit it with my Scotch-Brite pad, rough this area up all the way around. It's very important to rough these layers out. So when you lay your base coat on there, it sticks real good. So I'm gonna get all the residue off of this, stick it back on my stand. Remember these areas on the front of the cup or the top of the cup and the bottom. These are wear and tear areas, so make sure you hit those areas real good. And now I'm going to spray the base coat of this cup, which is going to be black. And I'll put all the links to the paints I use and all the other stuff in the information on the video, and then you can go down and pick out what you want to use And if you have any questions, just ask me. The stands I use, I made myself, and the reason why I like to have them stand like up like this because it's easier to paint and just nice, easy swivel area right there. It's just a 3/4 inch plywood with one of those swivel chair plates, and as you can see, I put the wood on there, bent up the little brackets a little bit, and screwed it back in there, and used a 3/4 inch by 12 inch nipple, which the cup sits on. So from here, we'll let this dry, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, got my base coat laid down. Everything's nice and clean. Now it's time to lay our stencil work down. I hit up the wear and tear areas a little bit more on the top and bottom. These are the stencils I'll be using. You can actually have digital downloads for these. If you give me your contact information, I'll hook you up with some. So everything's ready. We'll lay down the first stencil. Don't be intimidated by this bevel. Um, if you take your time and lay it down right, they 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 won't buckle or bend up in that area. So I'll show you how to just lay this down easy. I always smooth out the backside so I know my decal is sticking to that transfer tape. I make little cuts in there so it's easier to lay down in those beveled areas. Peel this off. All right. And lay down. So the top area I'll spread out and do evenly above the bevel. And underneath the bevel is where you're going to be tricky areas. So I'll take my thumb in the middle and just push the decal down or the stencil down real slow. I just gotta push all the air out of there. There is little creases, but I'll show you how to fix those. So everything down nice. All right, so when you pull the transfer tape off, do it slow and even. The way you don't have anything peeling off. Like some of your decal or the stencil work will pull off with your transfer tape. So just do it slow and even. Little piece right here was stuck on. Slow and even. All right. Now for the little trouble areas. So there's going to be little air bubbles there and creases. So I'm going to pull them off and lay them back down even. So I'll take my razor blade underneath and cut up and then lay the stencil back down to where it's all nice and even. And there's no bubbles that'll let the paint come underneath. That side's good. Little piece here. A lot of the people who use the epoxy cups, they'll use the flat cups that doesn't have the bevel. But I mean, if you do your stencils right, take your time with them, you can make them lay down. The vinyl I use for these is a heat resistant vinyl. The reason I like using this vinyl is it doesn't the adhesive won't come off and stick to your cup. So when you pull the stencil work off, there's no adhesive there. All right, so all the bubbles are all out. Everything's flat. Move on to the next side. So we're gonna get the center point for the other side. I use the fabric rulers, and on the Arctic cups, it's 6.5 inches from point to point on the tops. So I'll mark my little center point for the next stencil and go from there. So I made the stencil about the height from the top of the cup to the bevel, so I wouldn't really have to fool with it. So stick it on your center point, get it straight, wrap it around even, take a little squeegee, flatten all that air out. Everything looks even. All right, start from the top, peel it down, nice and even. Make sure no stencil work comes up with your transfer tape. All right, so on the bottom of the bevel of this stencil, you can see it kind of peeled up a little bit, but I'm going to take my razor blade and splice it. I'll pull it up on one side and bring that um, layer all together to the point in the middle. Then I'll splice the stencil work and then flatten it out. And there it is. Flatten it out some more. There we go. All right. I'll lay the name down. Go up to that bevel and then I'll just push it back up. Some of the stencil work is coming up with the transfer tape, so I'll peel off with a razor. Evenly, pull it down, comes all off. Then you can flatten everything else off, flatten it back out. All right, I got these little bitty Harley logos I'm going to put on the bottoms here. Just kind of fills out these voids. All right. Some of these real intricate little bitty stencil works will stick to transfer tape a little bit more. So you just gotta take your time with them. We'll get the last one. All right. All right, so for the last stencil work for this cup is going to be my business logo. And I always put those on. That way someone else will take credit for your work. There it is. And some of these little ridges, like the logo, you just got to push that stencil work in there. All right, so this one's ready for the graphics. We'll start with the white graphics, do our flames, but everything else looks good. All right, so I got this paper on the backside. It's keeping my stencil work in place and not getting stuck on the little hairs of my towels. So that's why I have it set up like this. So I have my custom shop white in there, and we're going to start laying down some flames. There's many ways to do flames, but this is the way I do it. So we're building these flames in layers. The very first layer is going to be a white, and we'll come over top of that with, on this cup's case, it's going to be a blue. So we're going to build up these flames all the way around. The there's going to be some residue when you're spraying the white. Sometimes we'll wipe it off, or most of the time you need to wipe it off, but let the paint dry first. So we'll continue building these. You can put as much detail as you want on the first coat or first layer of white, but remember you're going to come back with different layers. There's no pattern to this. I'm just being sporadic with it, just going everywhere. So this is a burning ember. What you do is start with a little dot and just squiggle it up. It's a funny story how to come up with those. I ran out of paint on my airbrush and I had to add some more white. And then when I snapped the cap to the paint, it splattered onto my cup. It's like, man, what am I going to do? So what I had was just add to it. So I just took my airbrush, started on one of those little dots, and squiggled it up. I was so far into it, I didn't want to stay. I didn't want to start over. So that was my little remedy for that. Flames are probably my favorite things to do. You just taking your time and it's all freehand, with the exception of the sharp lines, but you're just going to town with it. I like using the stencil work because it speeds things up. I get so many cups and orders, so it just helps me speed things up. But I do love freehand. On the little areas like that, you can create more lines, more detail. It just deepens the depth of the flames. So you want to get like your stencil work covered as much as possible, because when we pull this off, everything that's underneath that stencil is going to be black. So you really want these graphics to pop out. So many choices. Just about done with this first coat, or the first layer of white. They're starting to get a little bit of residue off on the black, so you can just take a little rag and walk it off. But try to be careful around the stencil work. You don't want to get it peeled off with a rag. Be sure to get the bottom. But this is the blue I'm going to add on to it. Electric blue candy from Custom Shop. I'm going to knock out the rest of these graphics on the bottom. Take out this blue. Cover the whole thing. And then we're going to add a mid-coat clear over top of the blue to lock that blue in place. You don't want the new blue, which is lighter, to saturate into the white or the saturate to the other blue. So you got to use that mid-coat clear to kind of seal it. Alright, so I got my cup laid out. What I'm going to go ahead and do is spray the blue, the electric blue on top. And I'll let that dry, and I'll come back with the mid-coat clear. Alright, just finished spraying the blue. So I'm going to stick this in my oven, let it dry, then we're going to spray the mid-coat clear. Alright, so the blue is dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and spray this mid-coat clear over there to go ahead and seal everything. And then I'll put it back in the oven, let it dry, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, I went ahead and sprayed the mid-coat clear on there. So this is going to be sealed in. I'm going to go ahead and let it dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, everything's dry. Now it's time to add the next layer of white for our next layer of the flames, which is going to be the lighter blue. So I got my whites put in. A little too much there. I got to draw it off. Pour some back out. All right. Now some of these areas, I'm going to highlight the little areas I've already painted and add some new. We're going to go all the way around. We're just working our way around, hitting those little areas we already did. Let's keep building. Alright, I think I'm done with this layer, so I'm going to wipe off the residue from the white. Just be careful around your stencil work. Now I'm going to go ahead and spray the lighter blue. This is a Hawaiian blue custom shop. Actually, I might use some teal. I'm going to lay down the teal first, and then come back, add some more white, and then the other blue. Always wear your mask. I have my little booth going. Um, it sucks all the vapors out, but I still have my mask on. So as you can see, the teal is covering the white. This creates another layer on top of the blue. The more you spray of that color, the darker it'll be. I didn't really like the teal too much, so instead of putting a mid coat clear over top of the teal, I'm just gonna go ahead and spray the other lighter blue on top of it. So I'm using the heat gun to dry off the teal that I just laid down. Wipe off some of this residue. Alright, so from this point, I'm going to add a little bit more white and create some more highlights in those areas. I'm going to come back with the lighter blue. You don't want to add too much on top of our first layer of blue, because then that layer will disappear. Sometimes less is more with these realistic flames. All right. Now we're going to swap this out. I'm going to add my other blue into it. All right. Start. Covering these areas in white. And I'm spraying over top of the teal, but I want it to saturate into the teal. Looking really good. I'm out of blue, of this blue, but I'm going to have to find some more. I do have a new one. I just haven't found it yet. But we're going to dry this one off. And we'll hit these other areas up a little bit more with a newer Hawaiian blue. Finish drying this off. All right. So from this point, I'm going to grab my silver and I'm going to bring these stencils. I'm going to bring the stencil work design out. So it's going to really make it pop. So I'm going to take my silver and I'll take my grunge stencil work and then go around the stencils. And then after that, I'm going to lay more of the lighter blue on top of the silver. Clearing it cleaned out. All right. I love these grunge stencils. So I'm going to start off with this type. I'm going to go around the edges of the stencil work. But this really, it makes it look like smaller flames coming off your stencils. So I'm just going to go all the way around with it. So as you can see, I'm really, like in the lettering, I'm really going to spray that silver on there because I want that to pop. So I'm going to come back around with these eyes to do a little more of the lightning crackling effect. Alright, from this, I want to add some more of the Hawaiian blue, which is the second lighter blue. I'm not going to use any more teal. So now I'm going to take this blue and spray over all the silver. By the time it's all cleared, or this blue is sprayed on, the silver is going to be faded in there. So it's not, right now it looks a little aggressive and weird with just the silver. But once you lay it in there, it's going to disappear, fade into everything else. So when you take the stencil work off, that black is really going to show through good. Especially when the sunlight hits it. All right. All right, from here, I'm going to grab some more of the Hawaiian blue. I'm going to spray the rest of this silver. All right, this looks pretty good. Get my dryer, dry everything off. All right, from here, I'm going to go ahead and remove all the stencil work from the cup, and we'll see what it looks like, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, got all the stencil work taken off. This cup is now ready to clear. Turned out pretty nice. But the clear coat's really gonna make it pop. So what I'll do is go ahead and get things ready to clear coat. I'm gonna spray 3 coats of clear, 15 minutes between each coat, and I'm gonna let this cup bake in my little oven for 5 hours at 145 degrees. That way I know the clear coat is cured and I can get it wrapped up and mailed off. But before that, I will create another video of the final product and add it to the end of this video. So I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe, throw some comments down, let me know if you have any questions about anything. I'll be glad to answer whatever you have. And stay tuned to the next video. Well, there she is, the finished product. Clear coat's nice and clean, no imperfections. Got all the highlights in there. Turned out nice. And you can do this too. It's not very hard. It's not intimidating. Just remember your clear coats, 2 parts. You have your hardener and your clear coat itself. I'll put the links in the description of what clear coat I use. It's 4 parts to 1 when you're mixing. Just 15 minutes in between each coat, and you can have a nice clean coat like this. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, just drop a little comment. I'll be sure to get on there and answer any questions you have. Please subscribe, hit those notifications. I'll be uploading new videos as much as I can. So it's a long process in these paintings, but it's all worth it. But I appreciate everything, and just hit me up if you need any help. Will's Custom Airbrushing. Thank you.